So that being said, the next person that we have, and I see him in the green room already, the next person we have is Josh Kovach. And he's going to be doing, he's a longtime AstroWorld watcher, and he's going to be doing something about data management. So let's go to Josh and say hi to Josh. And Josh, how you doing, man? What's going on?
Hey, Dan.
What's
just
happening?
getting ready for this.
Absolutely. Josh has been watching the show, I think, since the beginning.
No, not at the beginning. I actually started when I saw you were still naming the shows, and it was talking about data management. And like, this is a problem I'm having. And it went for like 3 weeks. You kept naming the show that and never talked about it.
That's awesome.
And so I kept, but I did see whatever other people were doing, and then I ended up coming up with my own strategy over the years since then, and that's kind of what I'm going to go over here.
Yeah, well, I'm super interested because I know, if anybody's watched the show, everybody knows that my data management is a complete travesty of science. I mean, it's horrible. So I'm looking forward to be picking up some stuff from you. So.
Yeah. Well, mine was a disaster too, and that's why I got into solving it once and for all for myself. So.
Absolutely. So, Josh, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And we've seen your images. You're a picture of the month winner, and tell us about yourself, Josh.
So actually, I'll just kind of jump into my presentation here because I go into that a bit. Can you see it okay? I think it's set up. Yeah, okay. Nope, that was it. That on?
You're in.
Okay. That's the one I want to turn off. Okay. So, I'm talking about data organization today, and we're going to be doing some, I'll go into that. I am Shecky Bobo on GitHub, where you can find the script that I'll be demoing at the end of this. Shecky Bobo on Twitter. If you're looking at social Mastodon stuff, I'm Shecky Bobo there, but I'm Astro Schwa at astrodom.social, where I post astrophoto stuff mainly. So about me, I call myself a code weaver, astronomer, and general enthusiast. I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan, which my area is about a Bortle 7, 6, something like that, depending on the day and the weather and whether the nearby stadiums have their lights on. I've been a software developer for about 10 years now. Started out doing Ruby and web development, which comes into play a little bit later here. Today I am an Android developer, and I have been for probably 8 years now. So that's my trade. And then I started up I'm an amateur astronomer now. I do like sketching and stuff for the Astronomical League programs, and I gotta change control here real quick. So I have sketches. I haven't posted any of those around yet, but I'm still working on some sketching programs. And then I'm a member of the Grand Rapids Amateur Astronomical Association, or the GRAAA, and they have an observatory out in Lowell, Michigan. It's quite nice. I've got 41 images on AstroBin, probably have 42 after this weekend. And you can find me there as Shecky Bobo. More not yet published. And so I started out as an amateur astrophotographer when I first learned of the term astrophotography. I went out and was trying to find a place nearby where I could actually see comet NEOIs back in 2019 or 2020, whatever it was, I think. Can't remember if it was November or it must have been November 2020. The dates escape me. But found a place, and I took my Pixel 3 out and was trying to take pictures, and on night mode, if I held it steady, it would all of a sudden pop up and say there's astrophotography mode, and I was like, "Oh, that's a thing. I'm gonna start doing that." Um, so when I started, I had been fixing up and restoring a Meade DS90 EC refractor. It was something that I had since like 2005 or so. Barely ever used it. Are you guys hearing me okay? I'm seeing some chat that it's not working. I'm garbling.
Yep.
Okay. So this was a telescope that I'd had. Hadn't really used very much, and like the tripod on this thing sucks. But my nephew broke the diagonal on it a long time ago, and then I realized I could just buy a new diagonal, and so I bought one, fixed this thing up, did a lot of work in the gears and everything, and started trying to use it for visual at least, and trying to get some astrophotography done using my phone. I tried so many phone adapters; they were all very difficult to work with, and this thing doesn't balance very well on its mount. So, yeah, it worked out okay for Moon.
Sign for you.
Oh yeah, thanks. It works. This is a great one for if you're doing photography. It's great for the moon, not so much for stars, because it's on an Altaz. So nowadays I typically use a Red Cat 51 which is great for wide field nebula. My primary setup is on a EQ M35 Pro, but I started out with an Ioptron Skyguider Pro, which was fine and great to learn on. And then I realized I wanted something a little bit more robust. It is also able to support my Dobsonian Zoom L130. I realized it was capable of holding that weight, and so I started hooking it up. I mostly use that one for visual when I just want to grab and go. But I modified it for Galaxy season earlier this year to put a new focuser on it, and so I could hook up my DSLR and then mount it to the camera and the mount and everything. And when I first started out doing this, I use a DSLR. I use a Canon T7, and so I got it's a Pixel remote intervalometer. And it works great. You basically tell it how many pictures you want to take, and set the exposure time for them, a delay in between so that the camera has time to write the thing to the chip. It's remote controllable, so I could just set up and then walk inside when it's too cold out. Problem with that was there's a lot of time math involved to figure out just how many photos I want to actually try and take. And the capture data that's recorded is completely limited to what the DSLR file system does. And so if anybody's familiar with it, the file name on those is just IMG underscore and then the sequence number. Not great. And so there was a lot of after the fact having to look over everything that I have, which pictures are darks, which ones are flats, that kind of stuff. Nowadays I use a ASI Air Plus, which has it's a lot easier to work with when it can connect to my phone properly. I can do an entire program on there. It has GoTo to control my scope and mount. And what I like best about it is that there's rich capture data stored in the FITS file. And so it stores, instead of just a CR2 raw file that the DSLR stores, if you're just taking them from there, this one takes that image or that data from the camera, mixes it in with the capture data that the ASI Air has from the program, and mixes that in. So it's got CCD temp and what do you call it? It puts in the file, the subtype. So if it's dark, flat, etc., puts in some information about the telescope and everything that's in there too. And so what's nice about this, and what I've started to use on this, is there's a way to, in the main camera settings, and I don't know if this works. I only have a DSLR, so I don't know if it works like this on other ones, but there is the ability to do a custom file name on them, or to customize the file name. And so what I do is I make sure to include as much of this information that it can give me in the file name itself. And so it shows you an example here, the light, M80 light. So it's file type, target, exposure time, your binning, the filter that you're using, if you use a filter, your ISO, and the date and time, and the temperature, and then the sequence number. And so we can also see in here what the file names for darks look like. They look very similar. It's mostly just missing the target, or the target name that goes in there. Flats are about the same. Lights have the target number in here, and if you're shooting a mosaic in ASI Air, it also shows you the panel, panel position for it. And then the bias here as well has, these ones are much faster. So the US in here is for microseconds. And so what I'm going to end up doing with all of these is, well, I want to use them in Pixinsight with weighted batch pre-processing. And I was doing this for a long time, just loading in kind of everything, and then I would have to, I don't think I used keywords at first, but WBPP is able to process all of your files, raw files, together and do that calibration. But you're able to do pre-processing of like your bias, or of your calibration frames, before you ever actually get them into light. And this is something that I've started to do because, well, there's a few different reasons, but one is you can just do that right away and not have to worry about it later. It's easy. It makes it faster when you're processing the whole, when you're actually processing your lights, so that it doesn't have to restack and recalibrate all your calibration files themselves. But the main reason is that the grouping keywords, they're great. I use them all the time, but there's problems when you're matching the different types of sub-calibration frames to the different things that those are calibrating. Because the bias, flats, darks, and lights all have different matching rules for what they need to actually match against. So your bias frames, they're there to create a readout gradient for your sensor. So this is just the baseline. Your chip is on, it's recording something, or it's being read from, and this is what you're going to see on there. And so this is there to eliminate that kind of noise. These are supposed to be the shortest possible exposure that your camera can take, and it's best to regenerate these monthly, quarterly. I usually do about quarterly, I think. When these are match two things mainly, but and that really depends on whether you're using dark or flat darks or not. So they are at least going to be matching against your darks. And so what they match on is the ISO and your time that you take them. So that's going to be a season, month, calendar, or however you want to organize those. And what you're seeing here in these boxes is the folder name. So I organize everything into a folder because WBPP is able to pick up keywords from either the file name, the folder name, or the FITS headers. And so because I worked with DSLR to begin with, without any extra of that information, I worked with folder names so that I didn't have to rename everything, all the files and stuff. So let's see. So yeah, in in darks, you want to match up against the ISO and how the time frame that you've taken them in. And if you're doing flats, if you're using dark flats, this is gonna match up the ISO on your flats, and you'll match up against the time too. But we'll get into the dark flats a little bit more. And so your dark frames, if you can see here on the side, I don't know if that's going to show up on the screen with all the compression or not. This is the difference of temperature range from 11 degrees Celsius to 41 degrees Celsius on my DSLR. And you can see just the way that changes with temperature. And so that's what your darks are for. They're to get rid of all that extra noise that shows up. And so the darks are there to create a thermal noise gradient frame to subtract or remove from your lights, or from whatever it is the target is. So with these, the temperature, well, the exposure needs to match your target frames, whether they're light or flat. The temperature, see, I said exposure needs to match target frames, temperature needs to match target frames. And ideally within 1 to 2 degrees Celsius, plus or minus. From what I've read, the noise on most chips doubles with every 6 degrees Celsius. So once I learned that, I started changing all my temperature readouts on my phones and weather stuff to Celsius, and it drives everybody nuts now. But starting to understand it a little better. It's best to regenerate your dark frames monthly or quarterly, just because for one, the temperatures, ambient temperatures that it's in are going to change. So you're going to be taking pictures in different, weather conditions, but also because over time the chip degrades and has, increases in like new dead pixels or just extra noise that shows up in a different way. So it's best to regenerate those. I regenerate them like every 3 months-ish. Or once the temperatures start changing enough that the old ones are out of range with the lights that I'm taking. So it usually goes about seasonally. And so just like on here, we're matching against the bias using the ISO and the season. We're matching against flats for our dark flat or flat darks. We're going to use to match against the same thing. Target needs to be against the ISO, the exposure time, and the temperature. And season, which we'll get into a bit. And then when we're matching lights, it's the same thing. We're matching ISO, exposure, and the CCD and the temperature. But what you'll see here is if we keep the name on the flats to include those there, we're going to have some conflicts in the matching. And we'll get into that, I think. But the main reason there is that with WBPP, if a keyword is set to be used, and your frame has that keyword in it, it's going to be used for matching. And so you'll get like your flats just won't match to anything because there's nothing in there anymore that matches 2.1. You're trying to go against your exposure and your light and your darks, which are 150. So those aren't going to work, which is why I do this split out now. The darks, let's see. Let's see, data capture. So my settings, I use the same ISO from the imaging session. So usually I shoot at ISO 800, just because it's like a reasonable noise level for the T7. And it's easier if you use the same ISO or gain for all your sessions, just because then you only have to shoot one set of, lights for that, or darks for that temperature and season. So yeah, exposure is matching lights to calibrate. If it's uncooled, just keep shooting darks overnight until you have enough. So my darks are a collection of over sometimes it's over a couple weeks to get enough in the right temperature ranges that I need, because it's an uncooled DSLR. If you have cooled, then you're probably fine. You don't really need to worry about that. You just set the temperature you want it at and go with it. Yeah, use a freezer or refrigerator as a last resort to try and get the right temperatures. I've had to do that a couple times just so I could move on with a project. And if you're shooting in the daytime, be sure you cover the scope to avoid any light leaks. I had an entire project ruined because I had light leak coming in from the viewport on the DSLR until I realized I at least needed to cover that. But then also there's other little bits of light that can leak in from other places. And so if you have a good cover for your scope, make sure you use those. And then another important point I learned while trying to do reorganizing all my data is that DSLRs will record the CCD temp in the EXIF data of the file. It's just hard to get to. If you're on a Mac, there is a program called EXIF tool that you can use to pull that out. So in here you can see the camera temperature, 21 degrees C. So I was able to actually go through and use this to reorganize all my old data that came from before I had the ASI Air, and make that reusable and compatible with my new data in WPP and everything without having to really think about it. Take a breath here. So here's my calibration diagram. On the left here is the library. This is stuff that can last for a while, and you just kind of have to regenerate these as the seasons change or the temperatures you're capturing change. And they match up on the ISO in the game. And then bias is there to go against the darks. So flat darks and your regular dark, your light darks, I guess I'll call them here. But those, you use bias to calibrate those the same way. And then you're going to do, and then let's see here on the other side is the flat set. This is stuff that you take every session. And they basically are there to, they work per session that you're shooting. So every night. Let's see. So, Brian, I think people on cooled cameras usually shoot them once every 3 months. You're asking, yeah. So, let's see. Yeah, your flat darks and your darks expire around the same time, but I'd say it's usually better to take them, and I always take my flat darks with my flats, and I'll get into that. But so here's what the grouping keywords look like when I'm doing darks. The month on here, that's kind of your temporal keyword, whatever you're matching on, either season or month, or you can just turn it off and just make sure that what you're collecting in the WBPP window is just of the same time frame. It doesn't have to be set as long as you're careful with it. But otherwise, you're checking CCD temp, ISO, and exposure are the ones that you want to match on. And then you use these keywords, you can just load all your stuff in and have it calibrate all of your different calibration frames at the same time. So you'll just come out with a bunch of darks that are done this way. But what you might notice is the file names don't always include I don't want to go all the way back, but the file names that the ASI Air was capturing don't include them broken out like this. So it just had, instead of ISO, or it was dark 800S, or sorry, 150S, and then 15C, and then like the date and time on it, right? It doesn't have those keywords in there. So what I needed to do was actually, I would go through and I would collect all the files, I would group them in a file, and then I would write out those things manually. It was a pain, but it was important and it worked. So if we're looking at the flat keywords, I'm using flat set. I've tried a bunch of different keyword names for these. Session is one that people use a lot. But and I don't know, there's probably other ones. Date you could use as well, but date is always tricky because you're shooting overnight and the date changes on you. So yeah, I use flat set, and I'll go into what exactly that's defined as. But again, binning, exposure time, ISO. With flats, when you're calibrating the flats, you do need to worry about CCD temp if you're using like a flat dark library, but we'll get into that too. And so this is just, we've seen this one already. Here's how everything matches, and this is why, or what we're using for when we're calibrating flats. We use a bias, a flat dark, and a flats. So then on lights, we're looking at the filter, gain, session, that kind of stuff. So it's your flat set is what is the same as session here. But your binning, your exposure time, your CCD temp, those need to match against the darks, not the flats. Flat set is the only thing you want your flats really. Flat set and ISO are the only things you want to match flats. Unless you're actually, we'll go into it, but there's also filters and telescope if you're using multiple like different equipment sets. So let's see, how are we doing on time? Okay, so organization assists calibration all the time. If you keep organized, you don't really have to think about it as much. So we're using folder names to create keywords. We're going to match, we're always going to keep ISO. We're always going to keep exposure time on darks. And that's going to look like, I use US instead of the mu here for Ryan, but and then your file system if it's supported, I guess. CC temp is your that's usually on ASI Air. That's included in your FITS headers, I believe, but it's also part of the file name. But the main thing here is I'm using these keywords in the new folder name, and then month I use to just distinguish. And I can always like join 2 months together if the temperatures are the same. But it gives me a good distinction between like which ones are which and how far I should be combining them. Because as we said, the sensors degrade over time, so you want your targets, or you want your darks to match your targets within a reasonable frame. 1 to 30 darks for a given temperature. A master dark once I have it. And then I store those in a calibration library, and I kind of sort those by season just so they're a little bit easier to see. So that's like 2022 fall, 2022 winter. I might switch to like A, B, C, D, just to keep them in the right order there. Are you guys hearing me? Keep seeing stuff that I'm getting cut out.
Yeah, it looks like every once in a while you're getting a little garbled or something. I'm not 100% sure where that's coming from.
Can you hear me again?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool. I just plugged them in. Maybe there was a power thing. My headphones aren't great. So yeah, just organizing those by temperature. So then with flat frames here are to get rid of your flaws in your imaging train. So dust motes and smudges and dew as it builds up overnight if you're not using that, dew prevention. And you want to keep those exposures short. I made the mistake of making them too short for a while. You usually want to shoot for between 1 and 10 seconds. If you're over 10 seconds, it's probably too long, and you want to adjust the brightness of whatever you're using to generate them. And you want to generate new flats for as a rule, I do it every session. Every morning after I'm done with a session, I go out, I set up my stuff, and take those calibrations. And so with these, you want to match on ISO, month, and season. I think I might be repeating myself a little bit on some of this, but let's see. Month, season always matters. Your darks, you want an ISO, temp, exposure, and season. And filter, rotation. Filter and rotation are ones that are optional if you need them, but if you don't change those overnight in a session, you probably don't need to worry about them too much. So for the gear, I use an Illumiglow light panel that I bought from Illumiglow. It's like a 6-inch or a 5-inch round thing, and then I 3D printed this. You can see if you're interested, that's the Thingiverse ID for it. It works great. If you have a bigger scope or you don't want to have to shell out a bunch of money for one of these, you can do an artist tracing panel. Usually you can find those for like $20 on Amazon or so. And the ones I had were too bright, so I actually used just printing paper, a few sheets of that to like lower the brightness down a bit. And you want to use the same ISO as the imaging session, exposure again between 1 and 10 seconds. And adjust the time, I'd say, instead of adjusting the brightness of the panel, just because if you're to try and get in the right range. because if you can keep your equipment for capturing that stuff consistent and with the same settings and then the same time, it's just easier every day, every time you have to go out and do it. And then use consistent exposure time for flats on a given configuration. So if it takes longer, if you need more light for filters and stuff, just take longer exposures for your flats on those. Every morning after the imaging session, cover the scope to avoid light leakage, just like with darks. I always take 30 with the light panel and 30 darks to match the same exposure time. And ASI Air makes it nice. I just recently discovered that you can just have a bunch of these preset auto runs set and just turn them on or toggle them on and off here. So I just do, I do my flats and then I do my darks and then just leave it. If you do them closely enough together, you can kind of assume that they're around the same temperature and you don't have to worry about the CCD temp keyword when you're calibrating. So when we do that as calibration, so organizing the flats, I use a folder name and create the grouping keywords for those. So I have a flat and a flat dark folder, and each one of those are in there with the keywords all set up. So the rule with these is if I'm capturing noon to midnight, the flat set ID on it is the date of the following day. If it's captured from midnight to noon, it's the same day. And so I actually have a rule set up for that, just so everything's consistent. It's always going to be like if I start taking pictures at 6 p.m., the flat set for that is going to be generated the following day. Exposure time is, like I said, we've gone through this. I always shoot at 2.1 seconds with the setting that my flat panel is set up. Works great, and you'll adjust that to get your what do you call it? Your histogram looking right. And like I said, you don't have to worry about the CCD temp of those differing if you take them all at the same time. But you can generate a flat set library or a flat dark library if you want, and that's where the CCD temp would be important, and you want to make sure that that stays. Yeah, I group my flats and my flat darks together. So what I have in my area is a folder full of flats, and then I have the flat set for each one. And typically, after I've organized these in the right place, then I put them into a flat set folder for that specific date, and that way I know I know the range of flat sets that I haven't generated anything for yet. And then what you can do once you have this is all you got to do is use the folder button in WBPP to add, the flat set for that specific one. And these I always just calibrate as soon as they're captured, and then they're done. I don't have to worry about it later. I just put them in the calibration library folder. So I've got all my master darks, master flats, all in the same place. One thing that I did here is the keyword and the exposure keyword and the CCD temp keyword from general master flat. Needed to calibrate your lights. They just won't match. Having to manually set your light sets. So, yeah. And the darks needs to match the exposure time, but the flats never do when you're calibrating against lights. So, for lights, using folder names to create grouping keywords, just like before. For this one, target keyword is implied, but it's always required so that you can keep them organized together with the right target. Flat set is always taken following the image session, same as I've already described. Exposure, I always set it to be 150.0s, or it's going to be the first whole number with the lowest number that I can get a whole number or higher. That's the rule. Yeah, so it'll be like 650 milliseconds instead of 0.65 seconds, that kind of thing. And the CCD temp is there to match against the darks. So integration looks something like this. Organization is going to be similar to, not similar to flats. You organize by target. I just have a folder full of lights, and all of them are just sorted by target. And what's nice here is since they're grouped by target name, and then they have the year, month, etc. in them already, it's easy, and I can just keep building up my target data and mix old and new stuff down the line if I want to. So I can have stuff from a year old or 2 years old, and just the stuff is already organized and labeled as it should be, and so I can add that data together later on. And then once I've gone through, once I have all my stuff organized there, before I start working on a target, I use blink after each session to figure out like the bad frames, and I just use the move button in the blink window, which I can show later, but you just move that and put them into a reject folder. And then once you've got the bad folder or bad subs moved out to a reject folder, move the whole folder that you've gone through into the accept folder. And then what's nice then is in WBPP, all you got to do is use the folder button, add all of the accept stuff, and it's already in there. And then from there, you just figure out which flat set, pull over your master flats from there, figure out your temperature ranges, add your darks into that, and then you've got some nice setup there. So what I actually do is I have 3 different, what do you call them here? I'm blanking on the name. Icons, which I didn't realize you could do. But you can have 3 separate process icons with these settings already configured in them so that you don't have to think about it. And so then you just load up when you're doing lights, you just load up your flats, your darks, and your lights. You don't need the master at this point because everything else is already calibrated. Or you don't need bias anymore because all the other stuff is already calibrated. Yeah, and every calibration frame is only needing to match the grouping keywords when you're at this point, you're only matching your calibration frame to the light frame, nothing else. And so you're able to, with the lights, just use flat set, bin, exposure, CCD temp, and the right things are going to be matched up. Yep, you only have to calibrate the bias, flats, and darks once, and all the matching conflicts with the grouping keywords are avoided. And you can use those same ones on multiple targets, because I usually shoot a couple targets per night because horizons change. And so I can use that same flat set that's already been pre-calibrated, the same dark set that's already been pre-calibrated, over and over again with those same, with different targets or different light sets. I don't know, this sounds like a lot. I used to do this manually when I was doing the shooting just with the DSLR and intervalometer. Yeah, I'm almost done, Dan. And I generally just don't want to think about it. And so what I did is I wrote a script that organizes all of this stuff for me. And this is available on as a GitHub gist. I'll post a link to this somewhere that you all can get to. And yeah, I'll show a demo of that now. It should be pretty quick. So let me get back over here. Share a different screen. Oh, I want to share a different screen. Does it let me do that now? Try close this. Share the whole screen here. All right, so over here we have the script. Over here we have the folder. So in here, I wrote a script that would do all this organization for me. So if I go into the bias, is there? I can run this Ruby script that I wrote and calibrate my biases here. So it's saying I'm going to prepare to move 400 bias files. And in here, there's a big mix of the date, temperatures, etc. And so is it a dry run? No, I'm going to actually do it. And it's going to ask, do I want to move this into this here, whoops, you can see how it's calibrating what it's going to move that. This is the folder name that it's going to move into it, everything into. So we're going to say go ahead, and it's going to go ahead and just do all of that. And it's going to ask for each set as well. So then, boom, that's done. I don't have to worry about that. Same thing with the darks. Let me do that one. Oops. Same script, different thing I'm calibrating here. 1120 dark files. Do I want to move dark set in that one? And notice this one's a 2.1. I don't know if you can see this. This is a 2.1 second one. So it's going to ask me, is this a flat dark set? Yes, it is. Cool. We're going to move that into a flat dark folder right there with the flat set ID and everything already on it. Do you want to move the next one? Yes. Is it a flat dark? Yes. Next one, I'm just going to go ahead and go down the line here. You can see it's asking for each temperature if I want to move them into that folder. There's a bunch of them in here. This is grouping them all by the CCD temperature. So when I get done with it, boom, I've got that entire temperature range set of darks all set up, and a bunch of flat sets already set up too. So then I can do the same thing with my flats, but the flats are going to be a little bit different because it has different concerns as to what things it needs to match against. So I'm going to calibrate those, not a dry run. So I'm going to want to, I don't know if everybody can see this, I'm going to move it up a little bit. So it's going to move flat set to here, and it's got this telescope and filter one that aren't filled out yet, right? So what it's going to do is it's actually going to ask me which telescope I'm using, because I shoot with any number of these four, or any one of these four. And so this one was from the Red Cat with my Beta Moon filter. And then same thing here. We'll say that was the same thing. And if I just press enter, it automatically picks the first one that's there. So now I've got all my flat sets organized here. And so what I do after I've got that part done is I just do a new folder with both of those. I say flat set 2022, 10, well, what was that? 27, I don't know what it was, doesn't matter. It's just a demo. So yeah, I'm making sure that it matches up against my targets and my filters and all that stuff. And then we'll go to the light one and run the same thing, and you'll see that that asks me the same questions. So is it a light? Yes, it's for Red Cat and the Beta Moon. Yes. Oops. Like a bunch. And I used to have to do this all by hand, so this makes it much quicker, and I don't have to think about it as much. But check out those lights, all nicely calibrated or nicely rearranged there. And notice it moved them out of my Auriga complex folder into an upper one, but that's it. And I actually wrote this so that it could calibrate or rename all of these image ones too. It just asks a few more questions, and it pulls up CCD temp from the EXIF data. I don't know if I have time to demo that one, Dan.
Yeah, no, Nico's in the background waiting in the wings.
All right, yeah, I'll go ahead and stop now then.
Hey, no, that is an awesome script. I remember when you shared that originally on GitHub, and that thing is unbelievable. And you have a lot of questions on it regarding if you know, the link and all that, so that they. Yeah,
I'll post those in the chat, or I'll post those somewhere so that we can share that out.
Right in the chat, that's fine, and then I'll put it in the description later on when I redo the video. But that's a really cool way to organize your data, man. That's a lot. You and I are gonna have to talk offline because even I didn't get all that. So
yeah, I know it was a lot, and I tried to slam it all in there quick. But there's the thing about it is I no longer really have to think about it anymore.
Yep.
I just run the script, and it's all organized for me. So
Awesome.
I hope this helps other people with their, chaos of organization.
That's good. I'm sure it will. And then, yeah, just send that link over, and if you want, I'll share in the chat, or you can log into YouTube and throw it up there, and then
All right. Yeah,
I'm sure
we'll
you'll get lots of questions. Also throw your email on there because people are going to have to ask you questions.
Oh, yeah.
About it. I'm sure.
Yep.
So,
and just to know, the script that's there, if you use it, it's specifically to run on a Mac with Ruby running, and there's stuff on how to do that. You can do it on Windows, but I haven't done it. Disclaimer: it's as is software, open source. You can change it if you want to, but I'm not responsible for loss of data. Use it on some test data first.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh.
Yeah.
All right. Josh, thank you so much. And I know that, let's see, give me 1 second.